But one of the things that I think is really important that we understand is that in 1.5 hours, enough solar energy hits the Earth's surface to power all human activity for the entire year. Okay? So let's think about that, right? In the time it's going to take us on the field to crush William and Mary, right? We can power our generators so that we can have tailgates all season long, right? We can have enough energy to power all the lights in all of our buildings across the world. We can power all of our manufacturing plants, right? So all of human activity could be handled with 1.5 hours of solar radiation on the Earth's planet. So that's pretty awesome, right? And so if you think about the potential that solar energy has, you might say, then why don't we do it now, right? I mean, that sounds really good. Why aren't we actually utilizing solar energy now? And that comes down to two big issues. One, cost, and two, storage. All right? And so Virginia Tech researchers that span from the College of Science to the College of Engineering to the College of Agriculture are actually working on solutions to these two remaining barriers to the widespread implementation of solar energy. So let's talk a little bit about these barriers. Cost. All right. Where are the bill payers in the room? All right. Advancement folks, did you catch that? No? Okay. All right, good. No. I'm kidding. Any of you use electric heat? Anybody? What's your bill say per month? What's your bill, average bill? So about $400. Okay. So it's about $400. If I were to ask you to spend $4,000 a month, is that in your family budget? Yeah, didn't think so, right? I mean, that's a major issue, right? We can't take on that added cost into our budget every month. So, we can't go from this kind of, well, these are $10,000 stacks, right? Nobody spends that much money on energy, but we can't go from paying this much to going to paying that much. It's just not going to work for our lives. So we need to figure out a solution to this cost issue, and it lies in donuts. All right. Now, Homer Simpson, I'm sure, is incredibly happy that I said that, and we're going to come back to how the solution lies in powdered donuts in a second. But we have another barrier that we have to deal with, and that's storage, right? So tonight, after the game, when we come back and we're watching the highlights on ESPN, right, there's no sun up to power our television, right? And right now, energy is a use it or lose it technology. So if we're generating the solar energy and we're using it right then, great, but we can't come back and use it later. Another big issue with storage is cloudy days like today. Let's hope that they keep pushing back the rain forecast. But, it's cloudy out there, so not much sun today, so we're not going to get a lot of solar energy hitting our solar panels today. So how do we overcome this idea that when it's really sunny out, we can get a lot of energy, but we need to use it when it's nighttime and when it's cloudy? So storage. And so the answer to storage, we don't have to look any further than the Hahn Horticultural Garden. All right, so two really simple things, donuts and plants, can potentially overcome these drastic barriers that we have to solar energy implementation. All right, so back to donuts. How are donuts going to help us fix the cost of solar energy? All right, so these are silicon solar panels. This is what you see out there now on people's roofs, right? We had a huge campaign called Solarize Blacksburg, so there's a lot around Blacksburg on people's roofs. And they've got these nice black panels. Anybody know what that black stuff is? Silicon, okay? And that is the most expensive component of a solar cell, all right? So if it's the most expensive component of a solar cell, why don't we replace it with something that's ridiculously cheap, right? So what are we going to replace the silicon in silicon solar cells with? A chemical called titanium dioxide. Now, I know it's a chemical structure, so let's put it into things that we can understand, and I surely can tell you that you interacted with titanium dioxide already today. Not only if you ate one of those wonderful powdered donuts up there, but also, and I hope this is true, you all brushed your teeth. Okay? All right? So TiO2 is the white stuff in toothpaste. It's in the powder on powdered donuts. It's in the paint in paint cans, and it's in white bread. Okay? So if titanium dioxide is cheap enough that we can put it in these things, I mean, in literally toothpaste, we just spit it down the drain every day, right? I mean, we're just wasting it. So if it's cheap enough that we can put it into toothpaste, if we can make a solar cell out of it, we can drastically reduce the cost. And so that's what we work with in our lab. We're trying to make, silicon solar cells, but we're trying to replace the silicon with this titanium dioxide. Now, one of the bad things with titanium dioxide is that it's white. And if you look at silicon, it's black. Okay? So it turns out that black things interact with the sun much more readily than white things. And that's why when you wear black clothes out in the sun, you get hot, right? But if you wear white clothes, you don't, right? And it's because white clothes reflect all of the solar radiation and black clothes absorb it, right? And so if I'm going to make a solar cell out of a white donut, I'm not going to do real well, right? And so what my students are doing, and I can tell you right now, there's some over in Davidson Hall doing this right now. They're creating materials that can turn these white donuts pretty colors, okay? And then they're putting together these solar cell modules and testing their efficiency, and we're trying to get to a point where we can compete with silicon solar cells. So donuts is one solution to solar implementation. Then we have to deal with that storage problem, right? Because if I can make them cheap, that's great, but I don't get rid of rainy days, right? So how are we going to overcome this idea that we need to store energy? Well, we have to look no further than plants. Plants do this every day, okay? It's called photosynthesis. So in plants, it takes sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, and converts it into stored fuel, sugar, our stored fuel, right? So it's that wonderful breakfast that you ate, those donuts, right? That's our fuel. And it's going to allow us to scream, let's go, right? As loud as possible, right? So what we want to do is we want to look to these plants for inspiration to store energy in something that we can use later. Now, we can't use sugars, right? You're not going to go out to your car tomorrow and go to Kroger and get a bag of sugar and dump it into your gas tank and then drive your car, right? We're not going to be able to do that. So what we need to do is we actually need to store it as something that we can already use. So what we think about in my lab is storing it in chemical fuels. So methane, you might know it as natural gas, right? I can take these same components, sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, and make methane. Okay? That's really useful for a consumer because you don't have to change where you get your boiler. If you run on natural gas, your boiler stays the same. I'm just going to change where you get your natural gas from. The other thing that we can do is we can take sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water and make ethanol, right? So then you can start thinking about transportable fuels. So then you can put that in your gas tank and you can drive your car long distances. So this idea of using photosynthesis in plants as inspiration is great. However, plants are only 3 to 6% efficient at this process. Okay? And also, something that we know that's not really good about plants is they're not very stable, right? Or at least not mine, because And so it turns out that the thing that actually does this chemistry falls apart once every 30 minutes. Okay? I can't give you an energy generation system and say, okay, I'll be back to replace that in 30 minutes because it's going to be dead, right? No one's going to invest in a system that does that. So what we work with in our lab are ways to change the chemistry to create these fuels that we can actually use and things that are more stable. And so I won't tell you what those things are, but I colored them Hokie colors here. And so we make these nanomaterials that are capable of converting carbon dioxide into fuel by using sunlight. And just to give you an idea, these materials can operate 1,000 times faster than current catalysts that we know. And so what that gives you an idea of is like, imagine William and Mary's running back versus Virginia Tech's, right? So I mean like 1,000 times faster down the field, right? So that's what we're working on in our lab, and we've also been able to show that these are much more stable and can last weeks is as far as we've tested. That's just because the students get tired, and so they stop the experiment. I'm sure it lasts longer, but that's how much we know so far. So hopefully I've shown you today that work in my lab is addressing these two remaining barriers to solar implementation. And really it is the collaborations that we have with the College of Engineering and also other groups that are associated with our destination areas and strategic growth areas to actually provide you a cheap, abundant, renewable, and carbon neutral fuel source that can power us into the future. So thank you for listening, and I'll take any questions that you may have. So silicon-based solar cells are 25% efficient. Our donut solar cells are 13.
California is using excess electricity, solar electricity, to pump water back into their reservoirs to generate electricity at night, and they're at 70% efficiency.
Right.
I'm sorry, but 70% is pretty daggone good.
Yeah. No, we absolutely can do that. It's just there's not always the water infrastructure to enable that type of technology. So that's absolutely true. Like I said, every solution, totally viable.
Your process seems to be a way to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by turning it into fossil fuels. If there was some way you could divert from fossil fuels into just having these things sitting out and turning them into something stable, has anybody thought about using your process for removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to abate global warming?
Absolutely. So if we were to use this as a fuel cycle, it'd just be carbon neutral, right? We'd take CO2, we'd make fuel, we'd burn it, we'd create the CO2 again. We have another side of our lab that actually utilizes this same process to create polymer precursors, which we can then put into plastics. So yeah, absolutely.
What is the relative cost of a silicone panel versus a titanium dioxide panel?
Oh, so numbers that compare them don't really exist, right? And it's because titanium dioxide panels don't have the manufacturing power that silicon have. So, I mean, right, so if I could, at the same volume of manufacturing, titanium dioxide cells should cost 50% of what the cost is, so half of what a silicon solar cell costs. Right, but the issue is that there's a large amount of manufacturing power for silicon solar cells, and that's another huge barrier to overcome. So really, we don't need to match the efficient, we need to be better, right? And that's how new technology is adapted, is that you're better than the old technology, not equivalent. So the theoretical solar cell efficiency is the same for all cells, 32%. So if anybody tries to sell you a solar cell that's more efficient than 32%, they're making something up. All right, so that's just, so 32% is the same for both of them. All right, thank you very much.